A visa is official permission to enter a country, usually with certain conditions. A visa can be a stamp in your passport or an electronic record, if you have an e-passport. For example, if you are going to a country to visit, but not work or stay long, you might need a visitor's visa. Work, you might need a work visa. Study, you might need a student visa. If you're traveling soon and need to know the difference between a passport and a visa, we have you covered. Before traveling, know the differences between a passport and a visa because you may need both. The main difference between a passport and a visa is that a passport is issued to a country's citizens for international travel and identification. A passport is used to verify one's country of citizenship. If traveling outside your country, it is used to regain entry into your country of citizenship. Passports include your photo, name, birth date, gender, and physical characteristics. For U.S. citizens, some countries only require a passport for re-entry. Other countries may require a visa before entry. You should confirm if a country-specific visa * is required before traveling. Diplomats and government officials are granted different passports than what's given to regular travelers. The main difference between a visa and a passport is that a visa is an endorsement placed within a passport that grants the holder official permission to enter, leave, or stay in a country for a specified time period. The most common visa types are tourist, student, work, and transit visas. Depending on where you are traveling, a visa can be valid for single or multiple visits. Some visas require an application to be filed before entering the country, and other visas are granted upon entering the country. Certain countries require an interview or medical screening before applying for a visa. A visa, from Latin carta visa paper that has been seen, is a conditional authorization granted by a polity to a foreigner that allows them to enter, remain within, or leave its territory. Visas typically include limits on the duration of the foreigner's stay, areas within the country they may enter, the dates they may enter, the number of permitted visits, or if the individual can work in the country in question. Visas are associated with the request for permission to enter a territory and thus are, in most countries, distinct from actual formal permission for an alien to enter and remain in the country. In each instance, a visa is subject to entry permission by an immigration official at the time of actual entry and can be revoked at any time. Visa evidence most commonly takes the form of a sticker endorsed in the applicant's passport or other travel document but may also exist electronically. Some countries no longer issue physical visa evidence, instead recording details only in immigration databases. Historically, immigration officials were empowered to permit or reject entry of visitors on arrival at the frontiers. If permitted entry, the official would issue a visa, when required, which would be a stamp in a passport. Today, travelers wishing to enter another country must often apply in advance for what is also called a visa, sometimes in person at a consular office, by post, or over the internet. The modern visa may be a sticker or a stamp in the passport, an electronic record of the authorization, or a separate document which the applicant can print before entering and produce on entry to the visited polity. Some countries do not require visitors to apply for a visa in advance for short visits. Visa applications in advance of arrival give countries a chance to consider the applicant's circumstances, such as financial security, reason for travel, and details of previous visits to the country. Visitors may also be required to undergo and pass security or health checks upon arrival at the port of entry. Some polities which restrict emigration require individuals to possess an exit visa to leave the polity. These exit visas may be required for citizens, foreigners, or both, depending on the policies of the polity concerned. Unlike ordinary visas, exit visas are often seen as an illegitimate intrusion on individuals' right to freedom of movement. The imposition of an exit visa requirement may be seen to violate customary international law, as the right to leave any country is provided for in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Uniquely, the Norwegian Special Territory of Svalbard is an entirely visa-free zone under the terms of the Svalbard Treaty. Some countries such as those in the Schengen area have agreements with other countries allowing each other's citizens to travel between them without visas. In 2015, the World Tourism Organization announced that the number of tourists requiring a visa before traveling was at its lowest level ever. In Western Europe in the late 19th century and early 20th century, passports and visas were not generally necessary for moving from one country to another. The relatively high speed and large movements of people traveling by train would have caused bottlenecks if regular passport controls had been used. Passports and visas became usually necessary as travel documents only after World War I. Up until that point in time, passports and visas were usually the same type of travel documents. In the modern world, visas have become separate secondary travel documents, with passports acting as the primary travel documents. Some visas can be granted on arrival or by prior application at the country's embassy or consulate, or through a private visa service specialist who is specialized in the issuance of international travel documents. These agencies are authorized by the foreign authority, embassy, or consulate to represent international travelers who are unable or unwilling to travel to the embassy and apply in person. Private visa and passport services collect an additional fee for verifying customer applications, supporting documents, and submitting them to the appropriate authority. If there is no embassy or consulate in one's home country, then one would have to travel to a third country, or apply by post, and try to get a visa issued there. Alternatively, in such cases visas may be pre-arranged for collection on arrival at the border. The need or absence of need of a visa generally depends on the citizenship of the applicant, the intended duration of the stay, and the activities that the applicant may wish to undertake in the country he or she visits. These may delineate different formal categories of visas, with different issue conditions. The issuing authority, usually a branch of the country's foreign ministry or department, e.g. U.S. State Department, and typically consular affairs officers, may request appropriate documentation from the applicant. This may include proof that the applicant is able to support him or herself in the host country, lodging, food, proof that the person hosting the applicant in his or her home really exists and has sufficient room for hosting the applicant, proof that the applicant has obtained health and evacuation insurance, etc. Some countries ask for proof of health status, especially for long-term visas. Some countries deny such visas to persons with certain illnesses, such as AIDS. The exact conditions depend on the country and category of visa. Notable examples of countries requiring HIV tests of long-term residents are Russia and Uzbekistan. In Uzbekistan, however, the HIV test requirement is sometimes not strictly enforced. Other countries require a medical test that includes an HIV test, even for a short-term tourism visa. For example, Cuban citizens and international exchange students require such a test approved by a medical authority to enter Chilean territory. The issuing authority may also require applicants to attest that they have no criminal convictions, or that they do not participate in certain activities, like prostitution or drug trafficking. Some countries will deny visas if passports show evidence of citizenship of, or travel to, a country that is considered hostile by that country. For example, some Arabic-oriented countries will not issue visas to nationals of Israel and those whose passports bear evidence of visiting Israel. Many countries frequently demand strong evidence of intent to return to the home country, if the visa is for a temporary stay, due to potential unwanted illegal immigration. Proof of ties to the visa applicant's country of residence is often demanded to demonstrate a sufficient incentive to return. This can include things such as documented evidence of employment, bank statements, property ownership, and family ties. Each country typically has a multitude of categories of visas with various names. The most common types and names of visas include: for passing through the country of issue to a destination outside that country. Validity of transit visas are usually limited by short terms such as several hours to 10 days depending on the size of the country or the circumstances of a particular transit itinerary. Airside transit visa, required by some countries for passing through their airports even without going through passport control. Crew member, steward, or driver visa, issued to persons employed or trained on aircraft, vessels, trains, trucks, buses, and any other means of international transportation, or ships fishing in international waters. For short visits to the visited country. Many countries differentiate between different reasons for these visits, such as private visa, for private visits by invitation from residents of the visited country. Tourist visa, for a limited period of leisure travel, no business activities allowed. Medical visa, for undertaking diagnostics or a course of treatment in the visited country's hospitals or other medical facilities. Business visa, for engaging in commerce in the country. These visas generally preclude permanent employment, for which a work visa would be required. Working holiday visa, for individuals traveling between nations offering a working holiday program, allowing young people to undertake temporary work while traveling. Athletic or artistic visa, issued to athletes and performing artists, and their supporting staff, performing at competitions, concerts, shows, and other events. Cultural exchange visa, usually issued to athletes and performing artists participating in a cultural exchange program. Refugee visa, issued to persons fleeing the dangers of persecution, a war, or a natural disaster. Pilgrimage visa, this type of visa is mainly issued to those intending to visit religious destinations and or to take part in particular religious ceremonies. Such visas can usually be obtained relatively quickly and at a low cost. Those using them are usually permitted to travel only as a group, however. The most well-known example is Saudi Arabia's Hajj visa. Visas valid for long-term stays of a specific duration include student visa, F1 in the United States, which allows its holder to study at an institution of higher learning in the issuing country. The F2 visa allows the student's dependents to accompany them in the United States. Research visa, for students doing fieldwork in the host country. Temporary worker visa, for approved employment in the host country. These are generally more difficult to obtain but valid for longer periods of time than a business visa. Examples of these are the United States H-1B and L-1 visas. Depending on a particular country, the status of temporary worker may or may not evolve into the status of permanent resident or to naturalization. Journalist visa, which some countries require of people in that occupation when traveling for their respective news organizations. Countries that insist on this include Cuba, China, Iran, Japan, North Korea, Saudi Arabia, the United States, I-visa, and Zimbabwe. Residence visa, granted to people obtaining long-term residence in the host country. In some countries, such as New Zealand, long-term residence is a necessary step to obtain the status of a permanent resident. Asylum visa, issued to people who have suffered or reasonably fear persecution in their own country due to their political activities or opinion, or features, or association with a social group, or were exiled from their own country. Dependent visa, issued to certain family members of holder of a long-stay visa of certain other types, example to spouse and children of a qualified employee holding a temporary worker visa. Digital nomad visa, for digital nomads who want to temporarily reside in a country while performing remote work. Thailand launched its Smart Visa, targeted at high-expertise foreigners and entrepreneurs to stay a longer time in Thailand, with online applications for the visa being planned for late 2018. Estonia has also announced plans for a digital nomad visa, after the launch of its e-residency program. Granted for those intending to settle permanently in the issuing country, obtain the status of a permanent resident with the prospect of possible naturalization in the future. Spouse visa or partner visa, granted to the spouse, civil partner, or de facto partner of a resident or citizen of a given country to enable the couple to settle in that country. Family member visa, for other members of the family of a resident or citizen of a given country. Usually, only the closest ones are covered. Parents, often restricted to helpless ones, i.e., those who, due to their elderly age or state of health, need supervision and care. Children, including adopted ones, often restricted to those who have not reached the age of maturity or helpless ones. Often also extended to grandchildren or grandparents, where their immediate parents or children, respectively, are for whichever reason unable to take care of them, often also extended to helpless siblings. Marriage visa, granted for a limited period before intended marriage or conclusion of a civil partnership based on a proven relationship with a citizen of the destination country. For example, a German woman wishing to marry an American man would obtain a fiancé visa, also known as a K-1 visa, to allow her to enter the United States. A K-1 fiancé visa is valid for 4 months from the date of its approval. 12. Pensioner visa, also known as retiree visa or retirement visa, issued by a limited number of countries, Australia, Argentina, Thailand, Panama, etc., to those who can demonstrate a foreign source of income and who do not intend to work in the issuing country. Age limits apply in some cases. These are granted to officials doing jobs for their governments, or otherwise representing their countries in the host country, such as the personnel of diplomatic missions. A diplomatic visa in combination with a regular or diplomatic passport. Courtesy visas are issued to representatives of foreign governments or international organizations who do not qualify for diplomatic status but do merit expedited, courteous treatment. An example of this is Australia's Special Purpose Visa. Normally visa applications are made at and collected from a consulate, embassy, or other diplomatic mission. Also known as visas on arrival, VOA, they are granted at a port of entry. This is distinct from visa-free entry, where no visa is required, as the visitor must still obtain the visa on arrival before proceeding to immigration control. Almost all countries will consider issuing a visa, or another document to the same effect, on arrival to a visitor arriving in unforeseen exceptional circumstances, for example. Under provisions of Article 35 of the Schengen Visa Code, a visa may be issued at a border in situations such as the diversion of a flight causing air passengers in transit to pass through 2 or more airports instead of 1. In 2010, Iceland's Eyjafjallajökull volcano erupted, causing significant disruption of air travel throughout Europe, and the EU responded by announcing that it would issue visas at land borders to stranded travelers. Under Section 212, d. 4, of the Immigration and Naturalization Act, visa waivers can be issued to travelers arriving at American ports of entry in emergency situations or under other conditions. Certain international airports in Russia have consuls on duty, who have the power to issue visas on the spot. Some countries issue visas on arrival to special categories of travelers, such as seafarers or aircrew. Some countries issue them to regular visitors. There often are restrictions. For example, Belarus issues visas on arrival in Minsk International Airport only to nationals of countries where there is no consular representation of Belarus. Thailand only issues visas on arrival at certain border checkpoints. The most notable crossing where visas on arrival are not issued is the Padang Besar checkpoint for passenger trains between Malaysia and Thailand. An electronic visa, e-visa or e-visa, is stored in a computer and is linked to the passport number so no label, sticker, or stamp is placed in the passport before travel. The application is done over the internet, and the receipt acts as a visa, which can be printed or stored on a mobile device. Visas can also be single entry, which means the visa is cancelled as soon as the holder enters the country, double entry, or multiple entry, which permits double or multiple entries into the country with the same visa. Countries may also issue re-entry permits that allow temporarily leaving the country without invalidating the visa. Even a business visa will normally not allow the holder to work in the host country without an additional work permit. Once issued, a visa will typically have to be used within a certain period of time. In some countries, the validity of a visa is not the same as the authorized period of stay. The visa validity then indicates the time period when the entry is permitted into the country. For example, if a visa has been issued to begin on January 1 and to expire on March 30, and the typical authorized period of stay in a country is 90 days, then the 90-day authorized stay starts on the day the passenger enters the country. Entrance has to be between January 1st and March 30th. Thus, the latest day the traveler could conceivably stay in the issuing country is July 1st, if the traveler entered on March 30th. This interpretation of visas is common in the Americas. With other countries, a person may not stay beyond the period of validity of their visa, which is usually set within the period of validity of their passport. The visa may also limit the total number of days the visitor may spend in the applicable territory within the period of validity. This interpretation of visa periods is common in Europe. Once in the country, the validity period of a visa or authorized stay can often be extended for a fee at the discretion of immigration authorities. Overstaying a period of authorized stay given by the immigration officers is considered illegal immigration even if the visa validity period is not over, i.e., for multiple entry visas, and a form of being out of status, and the offender may be fined, prosecuted, deported, or even blacklisted from entering the country again. Entering a country without a valid visa or visa exemption may result in detention and removal, deportation or exclusion, from the country. Undertaking activities that are not authorized by the status of entry, for example, working while possessing a non-worker tourist status, can result in the individual being deemed liable for deportation, commonly referred to as an illegal alien. Such violation is not a violation of a visa, despite the common misuse of the phrase, but a violation of status, hence the term out of status. Even having a visa does not guarantee entry to the host country. The border crossing authorities make the final determination to allow entry, and may even cancel a visa at the border if the alien cannot demonstrate to their satisfaction that they will abide by the status their visa grants them. Some countries that do not require visas for short stays may require a long-stay visa for those who intend to apply for a residence permit. For example, the EU does not require a visa of citizens of many countries for stays under 90 days, but its member states require a long-stay visa of such citizens for longer stays. Many countries have a mechanism to allow the holder of a visa to apply to extend a visa. In Denmark, a visa holder can apply to the Danish Immigration Service for a residence permit after they have arrived in the country. In the United Kingdom, applications can be made to UK visas and immigration. In certain circumstances, it is impossible for the holder of the visa to do this, either because the country does not have a mechanism to prolong visas or, most likely, because the holder of the visa is using a short-stay visa to live in a country. Some foreign visitors sometimes engage in what is known as a visa run, leaving a country usually to a neighboring country for a short period just before the permitted length of stay expires, then returning to the first country to get a new entry stamp in order to extend their stay, reset the clock. Despite the name, a visa run is usually done with a passport that can be used for entry without a visa. Visa runs are frowned upon by immigration authorities as such acts may signify that the foreigner wishes to reside permanently and might also work in that country, purposes that visitors are prohibited from engaging in and usually require an immigrant visa or a work visa. Immigration officers may deny re-entry to visitors suspected of engaging in prohibited activities, especially when they have done repeated visa runs and have no evidence of spending reasonable time in their home countries or countries where they have the right to reside and work. To combat visa runs, some countries have limits on how long visitors can spend in the country without a visa, as well as how much time they have to stay out before resetting the clock. For example, Schengen countries impose a maximum limit for visitors of 90 days in any 180-day period. Some countries do not reset the clock when a visitor comes back after visiting a neighboring country. For example, the United States does not give visitors a new period of stay when they come back from visiting Canada, Mexico, or the Caribbean. Instead, they are readmitted to the United States for the remaining days granted on their initial entry. Some other countries, e.g. Thailand, allow visitors who arrive by land from neighboring countries a shorter length of stay than those who arrive by air. In some cases, a visa run is necessary to activate new visas or change the immigration status of a person. An example would be leaving a country and then returning immediately to activate a newly issued work visa before a person can legally work. In general, an applicant may be refused a visa if they do not meet the requirements for admission or entry under that country's immigration laws. More specifically, a visa may be denied or refused when the applicant has committed fraud, deception, or misrepresentation in his or her current application as well as in a previous application, has obtained a criminal record, has been arrested, or has criminal charges pending, is considered to be a threat to national security, does not have a good moral character, has previous visa/immigration violations, even if the violations did not happen in the country the applicant is seeking a visa for, had their previous visa application, or application for immigration benefits refused and cannot prove that the reasons for the previous refusals no longer exist or are not applicable anymore, even if the refusals did not previously happen in the country the applicant is seeking a visa for, cannot prove to have strong ties to their current country of nationality or residence, for those who are applying for temporary or non-immigrant visas, intends to reside or work permanently in the country she/he will visit if not applying for an immigrant or work visa respectively, fails to demonstrate intent to return, for non-immigrants, fails to provide sufficient evidence/documents to prove eligibility for the visa sought after, does not have a legitimate reason for the journey, does not have adequate means of financial support for themselves or family, does not have adequate medical insurance, especially if engaging in high-risk activities, example rock climbing, skiing, etc. Does not have travel arrangements, i.e., transport and lodging, in the destination country. Does not have health/travel insurance valid for the destination and the duration of stay. Is a citizen of a country to which the destination country is hostile or at war with. Has previously visited, or intends to visit, a country to which the destination country is hostile. Has a communicable disease, such as tuberculosis or Ebola, or a sexually transmitted disease. Has a passport that expires too soon. Even if a traveler does not need a visa, the aforementioned criteria can also be used by border control officials to refuse the traveler's entry into the country in question. Thank you for watching this part of the video.